Welcome to Art Bazaar, a podcast that chats with artists of all types to explore the depths of creativity. Brought to you by the Alternative Gallery. We'll be releasing new episodes every Wednesday with bonus episodes dropping randomly. If you like what you're hearing, you can support this podcast by going to thealternativegallery.com and clicking on the podcast tab. I'm your host, Brendan Wonder, creative director of the Alternative Gallery, a non-profit arts organization in Allentown, PA, run through the efforts of dedicated volunteers. On this episode of Art Bazaar, we're chatting with Rebecca Ashdot, an archaeologist and artist, as well as the vice president of the Lenape chapter of the Society for Pennsylvania Archaeology. You can check out Rebecca's work and adventures by visiting her Instagram at resin_by_Rebecca. Today, we get to talk all about ancient civilizations and digging in the dirt to better understand them, and I'm stoked for it. Rebecca, welcome to Art Bazaar.
Thank you for having me.
So glad you can make it. I know we originally tried to do this in person, but you're so busy with school and work and adventures. So
yeah.
We were able to make it happen over the phone, which I'm glad you're able to be here.
Gotta love technology, man.
And you're up to your neck in finals, you were saying. So you're
absolutely
going a little crazy over there, huh?
Yeah, but this is like a nice break. I get to just ramble about the cool stuff that I do rather than all of the paperwork that I'm drowning in, you know?
Well, and I'm looking forward to this chat too, because typically in the past when you and I have talked about these topics that we're going to cover today, it's been like kind of in the midst of our metal shows here at the gallery, so we can only chat for a couple minutes, a few minutes at a time. So to have an hour-plus conversation about these things, I'm super stoked about it, because I think
it's going to be great.
I think there are so many parallels between what you do and what I do and what you're interested in and what I'm interested in, and not just parallels in general, but the timing too is like kind of insane. And we're going to unpack that.
Yeah, all right, I'm down for it.
But I'm curious, how did you first get interested in archaeology? Like, what first drew you into that field?
Okay, so like any other archaeologist, when I was 10 years old, roughly, I saw The Mummy, the one with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, of course.
Fantastic.
And I distinctly remember her getting like the kit that he stole off of the other guys and like gifted to her. And she got like her very first like dig kit in the movie. And I was like, that is so cool. I would love, like, I think I was more like mesmerized by like having a little kit like that you always walk around with, and then you can find cool stuff with it. And I was also fascinated by how like she could read hieroglyphs. She got to see all this cool stuff and like work in these museums and all that. And I was just fascinated by that. And then like, I think it like went on the back burner for a minute. It's not like it ever went away, but it was like, oh, I wanted to like do other things. And like when you're like in middle school, they're always asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would have like random answers. Like I would say, oh, I want to be a vet. I want to work with animals. And then like very quickly, like at the end of middle school, I was like, no, we're going to stick with archaeology. When I was in high school, I became a volunteer with the National Park Service, and I started working in their cultural resource management department, which is essentially their archaeology department. And I got to see like how it's actually done, like all the different things that you actually do. Like it's not always traveling to these crazy countries. It's not always like finding the coolest stuff. Sometimes you really are just digging a 4-foot hole because you have to. There's nothing in it, and then you move on. But I was really happy to get that kind of like perspective on it, because I used to be like a real stickler. I only wanted to go to these specific countries. I only wanted to like learn about this stuff. And then when I actually got to do it, I was like, give me anything. I'll dig anywhere. I'm in. And like I've done mapping in the Water Gap. I've done different excavations, and I've worked with like local archaeologists as well on some private properties, because in Pennsylvania, that's something that you are able to do. Like if you find something on your property, unless it's like human remains, I believe, like that's the only thing where you would actually have to like involve the state or anything like that. But like I've helped people work on their private properties and find cool stuff that way and make sure that it's all like documented and stuff like that. So that's kind of been like my pre-college experiences. And then when I got to undergrad, I went to undergrad at Northampton Community College and at Gettysburg College, where I eventually got my bachelor's. And I did my major in anthropology, which is kind of like the standard. You take anthropology and then you just kind of hone in on whichever subfield you want. I was fascinated by all of it. I think it's all very cool. I love the cultural side of things. The biological side is so cool. The linguistics is something that I wish more. I mean, biological and linguistic anthropology is very much kind of on the back burner, I feel like, when it comes to a lot of anthropology major programs, because they focus so much on the cultural or on the archaeological side, but there's so much cool stuff in the biological and linguistic side. And so that was kind of the other reason I wanted to get into grad school, because I wanted to kind of fill out those gaps that I didn't get in undergrad. And right now I'm in grad school actually at Monmouth University. Again, I'm doing an anthropology major, but I'm honing in on archaeology. But I've done biological anthropology classes. I'm in one right now. Like, it's super fascinating to me, and it opened like a whole new perspective for me on like what is anthropology, like what all it encompasses and how just interdisciplinary it really is. And I feel like not a lot of people know about that. They just kind of see you as like, you're either an archaeologist or you're like the person that like goes to random islands and just kind of studies people, but it's so much more than that. And you might not even know how much anthropological work is involved in like your own discipline or anything like that. So it's all just super fascinating to me, and then I just took it and ran. Really, that's what happened. No one stopped me.
That's yet another parallel you and I have. My interest and careers were often driven by the movies I loved and watched, and largely I got into archaeology because of Indiana Jones.
Yeah, well, that's the weird thing. Like, I didn't watch Indiana Jones until I was like well into high school. I had The Mummy as my like starter.
That was more of your era.
Well, yes and no, but like when you think archaeology, like you don't really like the first movie you think of is Indiana Jones. Like that's the first franchise you think of. I mean, I love it now. I have the hat. I've got a blanket with the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie promo on it that my boyfriend got for me.
Nice.
I have all the movies, including the newest one on DVD.
The new one was great.
Oh, I loved it. It was so good. Don't get me wrong. Indiana Jones is well a part of my archaeology like frenzy, but it started with The Mummy.
For fourth grade career day, I actually went as not an archaeologist, but as Indiana Jones. That's how into it I was.
Love that.
Yeah, it's fascinating for me. And I'm sure some people who listen to this podcast are probably like asking, like, why is there an archaeologist here? Like, of course, you're an artist as well. But for me, like, art and culture are obviously so intertwined. And I think obviously so much of like the art and history that we know have come from the work of archaeologists.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you just look at culture is so visible in their artwork. Like, first of all, you have to, like, what is considered art? Is it, like, the decorative stuff, or is it the stuff that is also functional? Like, so you start there. But even if you, like, get over that definition war, you see how much art is involved in archaeology, not even just art historians, but like architecture, ceramics, the way they make stone tools. Oh my God, is that an art? You know?
Absolutely. And I think, first of all, I like to put on guests who I think are really interesting, and that these are the kind of things that I feel artists should be paying attention to. And not just artists, but I think Americans too, because in general, I think if Americans took a larger interest in something like archaeology, I think they would see art differently within their country. And that's a big problem we face here as artists, is like trying to get support from non-artists and from people who aren't maybe involved with arts organizations. And I think archaeology is a great pathway to that.
I feel like it's something that I think a lot of people are interested in. They just don't. In my like group of friends, in my field essentially, or just in general, like in groups of people that I am in, I will more than likely be the only archaeologist in that group. I will more than likely be the only like anthropology or history or whatever like category. But it's not because they're not interested in it. It's just not something that they were encouraged to pursue. Whether a hobby, whether a career, whether whatever, like, like archaeology is not necessarily seen as something that you aspire to do for money.
It's not a traditional career.
Absolutely not. A lot of my friends, they're like medical students or pre-law or just business, finance, whatever. But they're all nerds. You know what I mean? Like when I'm in a group of them, like, guess what? I don't get them talking about stocks or like whatever presentation they went through. No, we're talking about like nerd crap from like the Maya civilization or whatever. Like that's what they're interested in. Again, like they just weren't encouraged to pursue this, or it wasn't seen as an avenue for them. And granted, it wasn't exactly seen as an avenue for me. I'm just stubborn. And then when I got to grad school with it, my parents were like, okay, I see you're serious about this. But also, like, my mom is, like, super fascinated by all of this as well. She's just worried for me like any other mother is. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, is this viable? Is this going to be good for you? Like, are you happy doing this? Like, are you going to be, you know, like, secure? And I'm like, yeah, this is going to be great. Like, I don't think people understand also just how much goes into archaeology, and also how many archaeologists are employed, utilized, doing work every day, like in front of you. You cannot expand anything without people like me coming out with our poking sticks and our shovels, making sure there's nothing in the ground before you come and build on it. Like, you cannot do anything without an archaeologist coming in and testing it. So, I mean, as long as they're expanding roads and building warehouses, I'm an archaeologist. And I just don't think people know all of that. They just kind of see us as like these like world traveling researchers, and some of us are, don't get me wrong, but a lot of us are also like cultural resource management techs or whatever. Like we're doing a lot of small scale stuff equally as important. It just might not be like insane research.
Now, I'm curious, you know, your public education, do you remember like learning about Mayan cultures or any of these things that you ended up pursuing?
So I did not go to public school for a lot of my life. I had a weird 2 years when I was in like elementary school where I went to Catholic school. We don't talk about that. And then from 6th grade until I graduated high school, I was at a charter school. After that, I went to like private universities and stuff.
That's yet another parallel between us. I had to go to Catholic school for a while too, and it was awful.
I ain't even Catholic.
Not even
close.
That's funny.
Not even close. I mean, it was basically, well, my parents are both immigrants, and they have a very, like, hard, education is the number one thing for them, so, like, public school, ain't no way. Like, they were not doing that. We tolerated it until we literally couldn't anymore, and that was roughly 4th grade.
They had the right idea, at least.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. But, yeah, in my charter school, our history teacher was very adamant about adding more information than what the textbooks said. Like, we learned about so many different things, like what happened in Congo with the Belgians and what they did over there. We learned about so many different, like the Rwanda genocide and stuff like that. Like all these different things that like most people don't get the education for until they probably get to college, or unless you already knew that you were fascinated by this kind of stuff and you went out on your own to study it. You know what I mean? Or you're like in an AP.
That's the problem, though. I think these education curriculums, they don't account for this kind of stuff, and it's only if you get lucky and have a teacher or a professor that really cares and pushes this stuff.
Absolutely.
The system should be doing that like naturally. Yeah,
it's really sad, and I would also say like I cannot speak for all undergraduate programs. I was in a very niche program at a very small school in the southest part of Pennsylvania, like just like 5 miles above the Mason-Dixon. I had a very like narrow undergraduate experience, but I feel like even undergrad is not like the standard now is a master's, I would say. Like I don't even think like a BA can really get you as far as people think it can. It can get you places. But like, for example, with my master's, once I get it, I can bypass a lot of like the middleman climbing the ladder stuff. I can immediately go up higher because I got so much more in my master's. And in the first semester of I'm only just about to finish my first semester, right? I have been involved in more excavations, more hands-on experiences, more networking opportunities, worked with and learned from so many different people in one semester than I can confidently say in my time in undergrad. Now, is that because it's a master's program and it's gonna be this like elite thing? Probably, but it feels like what I got from my undergrad was like the bare skeleton that I needed. And again, this is my experience. I transferred in between I went to NAC for 2 years because of COVID, and then I went to Gettysburg for my undergrad. Like, I had a very different, like, undergrad path. And I would say a lot of people probably did. But the fact that I am getting so much more just in one semester at grad school versus what I was able to get in my undergrad. And you would think it's Gettysburg, archaeology is like flowing out of the ground. Not as much as you would think, or at least not as much as we were able to do. And again, there's so much.
Is that because the sites are so protected?
I would think so. You know what I mean? Like it's probably a lot of like federal regulations. How much are you actually able to do? Are students allowed to do this versus, there's a lot of moving parts to this nonetheless. But again, like I feel like I got whatever I came out of undergrad knowing had a lot to do with me. Is what I feel. Yeah. And like, this is like my professors at Gettysburg were amazing. I loved all of them. I got to go to Belize because of Gettysburg. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that it was a bad program. I just feel like it could have been more. Sure. But again, very small school, STEM is taking over. Like, I know, I get it. I understand it.
I think that's the case for education in this country across the board, unfortunately. It's like one of the main tenets that we really have to focus on. And part of the reason I asked you whether or not you were learning about these things, first of all, I'd be surprised because I don't remember learning about like Aztecs or Mayans or anything when I was in school. And I just had 2 episodes ago, a friend of mine, he's a Native American artist and activist. He's Pawnee and Seminole. And I was telling him how even Native Americans whose land we're on, like they were mainly glossed over in history classes. They get a little land acknowledgement at the end of an email. Like that means anything at this point. And then that's what we get. That's now. That was not the case. Yeah, literally. Exactly. That's not the case back when I went to school. There was no land acknowledgement. I mean, they didn't talk about the walking purchase. Which literally where we are, where the gallery is right now is on land taken from Lenape tribes during Ditto with where I live, like, because I'm from the Poconos, I'm from Northeast PA, and the Dansbury Cemetery was destroyed because of the results of the walking purchase. Yep. The natives were unhappy, as they ought to have been, and then they ransacked it because they were just coming back to like set what was right because of the walking purchase. And I didn't learn about that until I had to do a project on the cemetery. Yeah. No, it's amazing. The only reason I really found out about this stuff was, again, because self-interest. Like, I had an interest in these things. Right. And because I'm curious and motivated, I sought this information out, and it put me on this path that, again, you and I, these parallels, you told me once that, you were excited to go to Belize, but like Native Americans were your true passion. Like, that's what you really, really love. Oh, yeah. So, like, tell me, like, how did your first passions for Native American cultures kind of take hold on you? Well, it definitely came from my work with the Park Service, because that was my first physical interaction with artifacts from that group of people. I started there as like an artifact washer. I was there with my toothbrush and my bucket of water, and I was just cleaning the stuff that they found at previous sites. And a lot of it was obviously like colonial times, like the Dutch settlements and all that kind of stuff, like a lot of ceramics, a lot of creamware. But then you would get like these like flakes, and then that's when I would learn like the different material that they would use for their tools. And then from there, you're learning like, what kind of tools did they use? How did they fix them? Did they create new ones, or did they repurpose old ones? Like, I ask too many questions for anyone's good. And this is how I like got to know like so much of this stuff. You start washing the stuff, and then you start being taken out on site assessments, checking if anyone's looting previous sites. You look at rock shelters. And my supervisor, like, she's an archaeologist. She knows, she was a student like me once too. She knows what I want to see, what I want to experience, what I want to learn about. So she also like let me in on this kind of stuff and showed me like all these cool sites and taught me a lot of stuff that I know now. I think I was always fascinated by them to some degree, but I didn't know a lot about them. But I knew that I loved stone tools, like the projectile points, the arrowheads, even the net sinkers. You know what I mean? Like, it just fascinated me, the way that they manufactured and made these. The technical term for it is lithic reduction, but we can also call it flint knapping, stone tool making, whatever. Like, it always fascinated me because I could not fathom how they could make something so precise, so beautiful. I mean, I'm sure like we found plenty of broken ones, you know what I mean? Not all of them are that amazing,
but the material that they used, how beautiful it was, like that's art.
Yeah.
When I started finding them on excavations, there was no going back after I found my first one, my third one, my 50th one. Like even now, I've been doing this since 2019, being on volunteer digs and all this and learning about it all and being in school for it. Like I never get tired of it. Like I am still as if I was like day one kid in a candy store finding this stuff, because like I'm the first person in who knows how long to see it, to hold it, to just see all the like the beautiful material, like the yellow jasper that they used and the stuff that they made out of that. It's mind blowing how beautiful it is. So I think like in terms of my love for Native American artifacts and the culture and you know, that kind of archaeology just came from the artifacts themselves. And then when I got to be a part of their uncovering from the ground, like that's when I was like glued in for sure.
I see now that you're the vice president of the Lenape chapter of the Society for Pennsylvania Archaeology. Tell me about that, and how did that come to be?
What a title. Okay. So there is a gentleman. He is our president. His name is Benny Younger. I was not aware of him until I would say about a year ago or something like that, when he reached out to, because I'm in like an email chain for like groups of local archaeologists, avocational archaeologists and stuff like that. And he reached out because he was like friends with a bunch of them. And he said that he's putting together this chapter for the Society of Pennsylvania Archaeology, which is already like an established archaeological society. There's a couple, there's the Forks chapter that meets in Palmerton. Like there's a Lehigh Valley one already. But for some reason, there wasn't one for the Delaware area or where I am, which makes no sense to me. I mean, I'm sure like the Forks River chapter, like they are a part of it as well. Like it's, you know, like the Lehigh connects into the Delaware. So I'm sure that they have some part in it, but there's none for like up my area. So when I saw that, I was immediately fascinated. And then he started coming out to a few digs that I did with Don Klein. And that's how I got to know him and like learn about like why, like he's not a professional archaeologist, this Danny, but he has taken like any class that could have been offered. He's taken it. He's fascinated by it. He wants to be a part of it for sure. And, you know, through like talking to him and getting to know more about him and working with him, it just kind of, I think, naturally happened that I would like snake my way into the exec board. And I'll be honest, I have not done anything as vice president. I'm kind of a placeholder, especially since I'm always gone, like I'm always at school. But nonetheless, it has been insane to see like what he's been up to. We recently got officiated as a chapter. Like initially we were just in the starting phase, but we recently made it official that we are the Lenape chapter. So that was super exciting. He did so much paperwork, that poor man. But yeah, he's putting together an excavation. I don't know how much I'm able to say about it, but like he's putting together a future excavation for something. And, you know, we got a PI, we got all kinds of people involved in it. So hopefully like soon we'll be seeing more of like it getting started. So that's going to be something super cool. I'll keep you posted on that as much as I can. But yeah, they host meetings every couple, I want to say at least every month there's a meeting. And I'm sure it's open to the public. He mainly runs all of like the social media stuff through Facebook, and I believe it's through the group NEPA Archaeology. So if you want to check that out, or anybody check that out, that would be your place to go to see what he's up to.
We'll definitely include that in the show notes for anyone who's interested. I was checking out that page. And you said earlier that you had done some digs in the Delaware Water Gap. I'm imagining those were Lenape sites.
So again, the stuff that I've done in the Water Gap has been with a gentleman named Don Klein. He is an avocational archaeologist, and he gets permission from like the local residents to dig on their private property. He makes sure to stay away from like Park Service jurisdiction and stuff like that. He sticks to the private property. With him, I've done most of my fieldwork experience, and those have been Native American artifacts. The one property that we've been on for the last, 5 years now, it's right up along the river. So, yeah, it's been a great site for Native American artifacts, for some great projectile points, amazing flakes of all kinds of material, a lot of jasper. That's my favorite one. Yeah, so I've been doing the most work with him, and he takes all of like the mapping, the provenience, and everything. He does everything right. Like, a lot of people raise eyebrows when you work with avocational archaeologists just because, you know, A, they don't have the proper education, a good amount of them. And a lot of them are just kind of like looking for stuff to find stuff. But that's not the whole point of archaeology. It's about preservation. It's about, you know, mitigating destruction of the sites. Archaeology is inherently a destructive process once you start moving dirt, once you start, you know, it's inherently destructive. So you want to do the least damage you can. And if you can go without doing as much digging as possible, that is the ideal. I know that's a little bit confusing, but you know, you want to keep the sites as intact as you can. And until they are being threatened by something like like expansion or like just natural things, like if like the river is eating up the riverbank and there's a site there, that's when you go in, take stuff out. I would say, like, for cultural resource management, that's the goal. You really don't want to dig unless you have a very, very good reason to, or enough evidence that it would be in your best interest to excavate, because excavation is inherently destructive. You know, once you move that dirt, you can't put it back. Once you take it out of context, you can't put it back into context. That's why we're using tiny trowels and brushes and not bulldozers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's part of the way that some archaeologists can actually find these sites, through the work of amateur archaeologists, just regular people that happen to find things.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of sites and a lot of, you know, what we know has come from looters, has come from people who are digging because they want to find stuff. And that's the unfortunate truth. And we saw a lot of that in Belize. It's really like crazy. The looters' trenches that I have seen there are twice my height. Like, you can walk in them like they're caves.
Wow.
It's crazy. And it's disheartening, you know, because they're not taking notes. They're not taking stratigraphy. Some are better than others, but nonetheless. And, you know, like, a lot of us know who they are because we've had to work with them.
They're just plundering. They're trying to make a quick dollar off of whatever they find.
Yeah, unfortunately, antiquity is still alive and well. And, like, you'll go to any antique store and you can still see, like, points on display.
Yep.
And I'm sitting there, and the nerve in the back of my head just, like, flames up when I see that, because I'm like, oh, God, you just ruined everything.
Again, that's an education thing. I think if more people knew that, including shop owners and shoppers, there'd be less of it out there.
Yes, but I don't think these people are unaware. Like, okay.
Oh, so it's a
I don't
moral
think
issue.
looters are unaware that they're looting.
Oh, not them. Of course they're aware. But I'm talking about, you know, the black market is really the main place that supports these kind of things, because there's a lack of morals in a place like that. But when you go to like a brick and mortar store that anyone can walk in, like, you shouldn't be finding that kind of stuff there.
Yeah. Thankfully, I don't find it everywhere I go, but I still find it. And it's still like, wow, we're still doing that. That's crazy.
No, it's unfortunate. I mean, one of the other things I was obsessed with as a child was ancient Egypt and the pyramids. And talk about, like, looting. I mean, that's probably worse than any other sites on the planet. You know, the ancient Egypt cultural sites have been just ransacked. And anytime they find something that's untouched, it's almost like this miracle. And it's kind of impressive that these guys just start digging in the fucking sand somewhere, and here they happen to just find, you know, a tomb of a king we didn't even know existed.
My least favorite articles are those ones where it's like, 11-year-old boy finds 15,000-year-old coin in his backyard and thus there's a site. And I'm like, I have paid so much money in tuition. And this kid, this child, it's like that never ceases to amaze me. It just, like, first of all, that just shows you that, like, I'm not going to be without work anytime soon.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, anybody can become an archaeologist, apparently. But it's so funny, those kinds of stories. Like, that's how we found Homo naledi. That's how we found, you know, full caves that had artifacts in them, because some kid was putzing around and thus he found something.
Yep.
It's so funny.
Speaking of work, because of the advancements in technology, you're definitely going to have some job security. And I want to take some time to talk about lost cities and how we are now discovering them. And I know you're excited to talk about this.
Yes.
LiDAR.
So, LiDAR. First of all, I don't think a lot of people know what LiDAR is, so I'm just going to give a brief, very, very spark notes retelling. So LiDAR is a system where you fly a drone or a plane, depending on the size of what you want to find, but a lot of the times it'll be a plane. And as the plane is flying over a very forested area, let's say like a jungle, the Amazon, wherever, it shoots down a lot of lasers, like a lot of lasers. And those laser beams, because there's so many of them, it's inevitable that a good amount of them will be able to get through those little cracks and crevices in the canopy and thus hit the ground or hit lower than the canopy in general. After the plane passes over, a computer will generate a crap ton of maps from the canopy, this far below the canopy, the floor, and from there you can essentially 3D model a map of the ground without destroying any trees, without disturbing anything in the area. It's all just digitized. This is a very simplified explanation of LiDAR, but that's what it's used for. It's used a lot in environmental sciences as well to kind of do the mapping, and they tend to use LiDAR a lot more in depth than archaeologists do because we're just kind of literally doing surface level stuff with it. I'm not too familiar with how environmental scientists use LiDAR, but they use it as well. But that's basically what LiDAR is used for. It is a non-destructive way to be able to map lost cities, plazas, structures, anything that you can, or just in general, hey, there's a big jungled area and we have reason to believe that it is a stepped plateau that had a plaza on it. And then they fly it over, they see if it is or not, and then you can see outlines of structures, outlines of topography and all of that. And then you can see oh, this is where everything is. It is hidden in the jungle. So yeah, that's the basis of LiDAR. LiDAR was used in the area where I was in Belize. I believe Belize has something about Belize having an incredible amount of LiDAR work done in that country because there's significant Maya sites over there. We know La Milpa, we know Tsunan Tsunich, that's all over there. So it doesn't shock me at all that so much LiDAR work has been done in Belize, including the site where I was. I believe it's unofficially called Chan Chich is the site. That's what we called it. So I don't know if there's been a new name for it or whatever, but that's where I was. And it was a team of we had our team, which was the undergraduate students from Gettysburg with our professor. There was a team about an hour away, I would say, at a site they called Ain Wanik. There was also PFB, which is a massive archaeological program. They have over 100 students, I would say, involved in that. They were at La Milpa, you know what I mean? We're everywhere. Yeah. Over there in Belize. I think on the plane over to Belize, I met 2 to 3 different professors from different institutions. So it's a hot spot for archaeology. The lady behind me was a professor from Binghamton University, and she helped me fill out my customs form. So just saying, Belize is a massive hot spot for Maya archaeology. And I was very fortunate to be a part of that.
And LiDAR is a new tool. It was only invented in 2015, so it's still very, very new. And it stands for light detection and ranging. And just to summarize what you were saying, it works via an aerial transmitter that bounces millions of infrared laser pulses off the ground, essentially sketching 3D images of structures hidden by the jungle. And therein leads to what I said before about job security and how everything about what we know about the Yucatan, about Central America, and the Maya in general is about to be flipped on its head because due to LiDAR, 417 lost Mayan cities have been discovered dating back as far as 1000 BC. And if that weren't impressive enough, they're all connected by a superhighway, the first superhighway to ever exist on this planet. And one of the ways it's rewritten our knowledge of what the Mayan civilization was is we thought that some of these Mayan structures and towns and villages were major towns. And now we're finding out they were like suburbs or smaller cities. And the biggest ones are yet to be uncovered, sitting there in the jungle.
The Maya were incredible.
That 417 lost Mayan cities, to me, that is the biggest discovery in the history of archaeology.
I'll put it this way. No technology has ever been created for the benefit of archaeology. Like I said, LiDAR is mainly used by environmental scientists, and we just got lucky that it benefits us as well.
They know a good tool when they see one.
We have to. We don't get funding to make our own.
That's right.
So, yeah, I mean, like, just looking at sites throughout Mesoamerica, like, you see just the most insane innovation ever. Like, look at Mexico with Teotihuacan and stuff like that. Like, that was a huge, like, metropolis at its time. I believe it was classic period Maya, that it was really at its highlight. But I mean, like, it was a massive city center, and it had apartments for workers. It had like all kinds of stuff going on over there. Like, that was their industrial revolution. It was massive. But even like when I was in Belize and we visited Chan Chich, just seeing the incredible pyramids that they had over there and the ball courts and all that, like, it's mind-blowing. And I mean, seeing it in pictures does not do it justice in the least bit. Like, my eyes were falling out of my head when I was looking at the stuff that was over there.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Mostly because I was sweating, but also because it was just so vast.
Yeah, the Yucatan's very hot.
These structures.
Yeah, you know, for me, one of the things that I was hoping more people would get out of this, the discovery of these 417 lost cities is first of all, it's gone largely unnoticed by the general population. It's like, how the hell did everyone miss this? What I was hoping was that people would hear this who think that, oh, there's nothing left to be seen or discovered. It's like, we haven't even started. And like you said earlier about, civilizations or artifacts on the edges of water, that is why we know so little about a lot of humanity's history, because humans build near water. And so much of what we've done has been lost due to water. And here we are. Some of these things are almost perfectly preserved under the jungle canopies. And who knows what we're going to find. And I actually visited Teotihuacan this past summer. And the reason why, so I've been dying to go to Mexico for many, many years. And the thing is, once you start trying to figure out for a cultural excursion, if you want to go see any kind of ruins, it's almost hard to pinpoint where to go. A lot of people think Chichen Itza. I would love to see Chichen Itza one day, but for me, it's just way too touristy. And I want to be able to take things in and see it because it's very, very close to all the resorts out there, which I have zero interest in being anywhere near that stuff. But the reason I ended up going to Mexico City first is because, first of all, I wanted to experience the capital city, the largest city in the country, get a feel for Mexican culture. I mean, the amount of museums in Mexico City is just mind-melting. And I'm telling you, Rebecca, they're these museums, world-class museums, are $4 to get in, okay? One of which was...
this is the problem. If I go there, I'm not coming back.
It was hard for me to come back. And I can tell you what, I can definitely live in Mexico. And the National Anthropology Museum was mind-blowing. It's the very first thing I did after we got settled. I went to the Anthropology Museum, and I could not handle how amazing it was. And, I wanted to really see Teotihuacan. First of all, it's the largest pyramid complex on the planet, so far that we know about. Who knows what we're going to find in that jungle? I mean, 417 lost cities. They're probably going to find even more than that. If they already found 417, there's probably more stuff that LiDAR didn't find that maybe is buried under a lot of soil or vegetation that we didn't get the best look at. But Teotihuacan, I just think it's so fascinating. When you think of it, it's so ancient that when the Aztecs found it, it was over 1,000 years old. It had already been abandoned for almost 1,000 years when the Aztec found it. And we call it Teotihuacan. We don't know what it was actually called. We don't know the name of the people who built it, who were there. We don't know what their language was. there's a lot of debate if they even had a written language there. I mean, there are murals with what look like pictographs, but the scientists still have not determined whether or not that's a language.
Well, what sucks about a lot of that is that a lot of their stelae and a lot of just in general, a lot of their stelae and monuments where they wrote down things were written on limestone.
Yeah.
And there's what you might not know about limestone. I mean, you probably know. It is basically just industrial strength chalk. It literally melts away. So when we got to Belize, we were surrounded by limestone, and at one point I went to help out at Ain Wanik, and there was a stele there. It was there was nothing to read because they're all made of limestone and they just degrade so fast. Nothing was ever there. And that's why a lot of information about it is also, a lot of information about Mesoamerican stuff is lost because they literally just picked the worst stone to write it all on.
When I was in Teotihuacan, we actually met this woman who her job every day was to go around and preserve the remaining paint inside the buildings throughout the complex. Yeah. It was incredible. There's some really exciting stuff about Teotihuacan that I want to share with you. And they had some placards there, which I haven't heard about this until I actually went there and saw it myself in person. And unfortunately, the two main pyramids, you can no longer go up, which was a bummer. Mm-hmm. But according to new archaeological evidence, the Pyramid of the Sun may in fact be the incorrect name. They now think that the pyramid was in worship of the water god Tlaloc. And so in coming years, the history books may be rewritten as the Pyramid of the Sun may be instead recognized as a pyramid of water. So I thought that was fascinating. All these years, all these decades, we've referred to it as the Pyramid of the Sun. Apparently that's wrong. Two really exciting things aside from that. The Avenue of the Dead, where it goes to the southernmost point, the furthest from the Temple of the Moon, has never been explored. There have never been any serious archaeological digs. They have no idea what's there. No idea whatsoever. And in the last few years, they found a tunnel going underneath the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent, aka the Templo de Quetzalcoatl.
I've heard of this one.
Yes, that temple, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent, that was one of the main reasons I wanted to go to Teotihuacan, because my whole life I've seen those amazing photos of the architecture and the statues outside of it. And in the National Anthropology Museum, they actually have a recreation of what it looked like fully intact with all its paint. Life size. Yeah.
That's insane.
It was mind-blowing. It was absolutely mind-blowing.
I'm looking up the Anthropology Museum right now. Maybe I'll have a summer thing to do.
It's $4 to get in, Rebecca. $4. I could not believe it. And you're gonna need several hours there. They have a whole section dedicated to Maya, which you're gonna lose your mind over. The amount of artifacts, it's I can't. I was taking tons of photos and video just with my cell phone. It's overwhelming how much they have. And people need to realize, what you see on display in museums is just what's on display. It's probably between 1% and 5% of what they have. Maybe even less than that. Maybe even less. But they have in person the Aztec sunstone, aka the Aztec calendar. It's shocking how large it is. It's way bigger than you'd expect it to be.
Yeah, I'm seeing pictures of it right now of people right in front of it, and I'm like, Christ, that's massive.
Actually, right here on my mic stand, I have a magnet of the Aztec sunstone. Nice. So it's right here with me. Love having it here. It's so amazing. And then I'm on the board for the Museum of Indian Culture here in Allentown. And it's going to
I wanted to ask you about that because I had no idea that was a thing.
Well, let's come back to that. Let's come back to that in a second. But I want to say something that's going to tie into Mexico City. The Museum of Indian Culture here in Allentown, every August we have a harvest festival, Native American harvest festival called the Roasting Ears of Corn Festival. Because there's such a small population of Native Americans here in Pennsylvania, we actually have to bring in performers and dancers and drummers from around not just the United States, but also Mexico and Canada. So one of the performers that is there every year is Luis Salinas. He's a mestizo Aztec Native American Indian. And him and I have gotten to know each other well over the years, right? And this past August, I told him, I was like, yo, man, I'm actually going to Mexico City, where him and his family are from. He lives here in the United States now. I said, I'm going to Mexico City next week. He goes, really? He goes, when are you going? And I told him what days. He goes, I'm going to be there too. So he happened to be in Mexico City the same time that I was, and he invited me to this cultural performance that really, it was outside, but it wasn't open to the public. It was really just the people who were there and their families. And he invited me to photograph not just the dancers, but the elders who were there for a special occasion.
That's amazing.
And then afterwards, so I got to be there for that. I was like truly honored. It was so beautiful. I'll send you photos. If you go to my website, brandonwonder.com, you can see some of them on there. He took us from there to Templo Mayor, which was the Aztec capital, which is now the downtown area of Mexico City. So I got to have this amazing cultural experience with like the lineage of the people who created it. And it was so incredible. It was really amazing.
That is amazing. Well, what's different about like Mesoamerica and in general South America, their connection to their indigenous people and their native past and lineage is so different from the United States and Canada. Even if they're not exactly like practicing the same culture and traditions and all that, they still are very much proud and recognize their native heritage and all that. And I think that's why preservation and these sites and like this just joy to like involve people in this and preserve it and talk about it is so different than what we have in the US.
Rebecca, let's not sugarcoat it. They actually give a shit about their culture.
Yeah, like they care about it. They want to preserve it. They're proud of it. They're happy about it. It's on full display. No questions asked.
That's the immediate first thing you notice when you go to Mexico City is that, first of all, there's murals everywhere, and most of them are of their indigenous people. They are so in love with their culture.
Well, not even the languages that they have preserved. Like, okay, so when I was in Belize, we had a lot of Belizean locals who came to help us on our excavations because, like, they know this weather. They know this heat. They know how to do hard physical labor in this weather. Meanwhile, we are falling apart. First couple of days, it was over 110 degrees. I'm melting like a candle. There's no help. There's no hope for us. Meanwhile, they're just bulldozing through all this crap with a pickaxe. You know what I mean? Very few of them spoke Spanish. Granted, the national language of Belize is English, but like, you know, like you come to a Central American, South American country, you're like, oh, they probably speak Spanish. The only one who did was a gentleman from Mexico who came down to help. Everyone else spoke like the local indigenous languages. Like there was one gentleman, I went out surveying. We were using a LiDAR map and we went out surveying, and he was like, yeah, I was a nature guide in this country for decades. And he speaks, I wish I remember which languages he said. I feel so bad that I don't remember, but he was like, yeah, like I speak all of these because it's still a very like present languages here. It was so fascinating to see like just how many languages they have preserved and used. And they were the sweetest people. Oh my gosh, they were the sweetest people. And they, like, I loved, like, I was an envirothon in school for years. Like, I love nature. I love plants. I can identify so many of them in, like, PA. And then I get there and I'm just like, these are the plants that you buy at, like, plant stores and you hope to keep alive. Meanwhile, they're just growing. Like, I saw snake plants everywhere. I was, like, floored. I'm like, my mom has bought, like, so many of these. And they're just growing here like it's nothing. Like I could not stop being blown away when I was there. And I was there for 2.5 weeks and I couldn't fathom it.
Part of the reason that they don't speak Spanish is out of protest because, you know, everyone talks about colonialism and they think of North America. In my opinion, the conquistadors do not get enough shit for what happened.
Oh,
they do not.
No.
They do not. Not in this country, at least.
Not at all. They watch El Dorado and they think that's it.
No, it's very whitewashed in that sense. And the fact that anyone in that part of the world speaks Spanish, it tells of what happened there. And there were all these rich cultures. I mean, even when the conquistadors, when they first discovered the Aztec Empire in the 1500s, they were amazed. They were fascinated by it. But they still destroyed it. The Templo Mayor, it's actually, when you go there, it's hard to really tell what it is because it's only pieces of more the inside, because how they did it, it was like one ruler would build a temple and then the next ruler would actually build a temple, a pyramid on top of that. And they just kept, it was like a Russian nesting doll kind of thing. And what you really see mainly left are kind of the inside portions. They demolished that. Like everyone, when we went to Mexico City, everyone was talking about like, oh, you got to go see the downtown historic district. You got to go see the downtown historic district. And that was like, I didn't do that to close to the end because I was more interested in like Teotihuacan and Xochimilco and seeing the actual like the Anthropology Museum and the cultural stuff, right? I wanted to get down there to see Templo Mayor, but like I was not at all impressed with the downtown area of Mexico City, because literally what they did is they came on this flourishing capital, which was only at its peak for 20 years. This complex was only completed 20 years prior to the Spanish's arrival, and then it was destroyed. And then what did they do? They built their buildings on top of it. Right across, literally right across from the Templo Mayor, built on the site of it, right next to the sacred site, right next to the sacred precinct, is the Metropolitan Cathedral. And some of those stones used in the construction were literally from the Aztec temples that were destroyed. So for me, it's just like, it feels very filthy. It's like, this is all just kind of like wrong. And then it's like, okay, yeah, they're nice looking Spanish era, buildings, but like I feel everything they were pointing to why they were nice, I think New Orleans does way better. And it was just like a giant tourist trap down there. It's nothing but fucking stores. Like I was like, I want culture. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. There's lots of cool little museums and stuff tucked in, but that's not what people really go there for. It's like a shopping district. And it's like built on the heart of this once thriving capital. I'm a big believer that we need to dump Columbus Day and replace it with Indigenous Peoples Day. Like, how are we still celebrating that guy? He actively participated and probably is the one that spearheaded the genocide of thousands of different cultures, not even hundreds, thousands of different cultures.
Right.
And we still recognize these people as heroes, which is just absurd to me. And I think, again, a lot of it is a lack of education. But I'll tell you what, like you're going to need like a week in Mexico City.
I think I'm going to need a month.
You ever hear of Xochimilco?
Yes.
They call it the Venice of Mexico, where it's because Mexico City, it was originally called Tenochtitlan.
Tenochtitlan, yeah.
It was in the middle of a lake, and they had a series of canals, and they had crops that grew on the water. Now that has largely been changed over the years, and it's more landlocked. But to the south, right outside of Mexico City, Xochimilco, they still have that, where it's still the canals, and you can rent a boat. Many tourists don't do it. It's more of like what the locals go and do. So families will rent a boat. It's like $200, and it's not per person. You just rent a boat, and I think it's up to 18 people can fit on it. And you just bring your own food, and you bring your own drinks. And if you don't have anything, little boats will come up to you and sell you stuff.
I love that.
It is incredible.
I love that.
It's incredible. You got to do it.
I would love to. I just got to find the time. I'm hoping to do another field school this summer. I need one for my program anyway, but it's a matter of like not all field schools are graduate level field schools. So it's that like rigmarole of finding one that is that I can qualify as a field school for my program. There's one offered through my school, but it's usually local. It's usually not as cool as Mesoamerican stuff. But again, like I want to do a lot of stuff that fills out the gaps of stuff that I don't know. As much as I focus on archaeology, like obviously I'm fascinated by all four fields of anthropology. Like right now, I love linguistics. I speak 3 languages. I love linguistics and studying linguistics through an anthropological sense of literally how you say things, the words you use for them changes I think it's the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis or the determinism where the way you speak, how you speak, the words you use and the language that you use changes or sets up your perspective. I'm so fascinated by this and just the way that languages, how they expand, how they change, how they evolve, how they influence other languages and like these little subgroups throughout the same country or even the same state and how they can be like, I'm so fascinated by linguistics, but I'm also super fascinated by bioarchaeology and I never got to do much of that. And, like working with bones and all this cool stuff. So I want to see what I can do with that to kind of fill out the gaps that I feel that I have.
Any idea where you might focus that? Like, Mexico, Belize, Guatemala. There's so many sites.
I love Belize was an amazing opportunity, and I would love to go back, and I might have an opportunity to go back. Don't know for sure yet. But I found like a few field schools, like Bay of Biscay has a really good bioarchaeology one where you would work in an ossuary. There's all kinds of them all around the world. I'm honestly fascinated by all of them. I used to be a stickler for ancient Egypt only, but that's just not feasible all the time. So basically anywhere I can is kind of my goal, but that's a very broad goal. So we'll see. I still have a little bit of time to kind of like hone in on what I would want to do. I would love to do a bioarchaeology based field school because that is just so unbelievably fascinating to me. It's just a matter of finding one that's feasible for me to do and one that would qualify for like a graduate level program.
You've mentioned Chan Chich. Now, that is a lesser-known site. Can you tell me what that site was in Belize?
So, okay, to start, we were a very spoiled bunch of people on this field school. You go to some field schools like PFB, you're slumming it in your tent, you are open to the elements, you're really out there. We were in an eco-lodge called Chan Chich Lodge. And we had cabanas, we had a fan, we had running water. We were spoiled rotten over there. We had a pool.
Wow.
We were rotten.
Refrigerators?
Oh, yeah. We had, oh my God, the best food.
Oh, yeah.
We got there, like I have two immigrant parents. I'm very familiar with food from all over the world. The stuff that I grew up on, some people would just look at me like I had 5 heads. So I was not concerned for myself eating over there. But our lodge was adjacent to a farm, and the general area, what the heck was the farm called? It'll come to me. But when you drive around the area, you see a lot of workers' houses, and they're all workers who work on this farm or are related to this farm in some way. Now, I'm sure a majority of our food was prepared with stuff that came from this farm. It was some of the best food I've ever had. Some of the best soups, the best food ever. Now, some people were being sticklers and they're like, why are there bones in my food? And I'm like, guys, this isn't Wawa. Can we please? But it was amazing. Boiling hot. I don't think you understand. Boiling hot, over 110 degrees, 1,000,000,000% humidity. You've seen me in person. I have hair. I have more hair than anyone should. I was falling apart the first couple of days. We really were struggling out there. We had 5 electrolyte packets on the ready at all times out there.
Wow. You might have to shave your head for the next adventure out there.
Oh, God. I was this close. To just fully going V for Vendetta, just all the way.
Do it.
So close. I already had shaved sides that I'm already growing out. I'm not doing the full thing. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I just braided it and prayed. But so our site, a little bit inconclusive as to what we have found, but it's suspected that we were kind of in the elite plaza, the elites spent their time there. Our site was about a 10-minute walk from our cabanas, which was lovely. It was not a difficult walk at all. In Wanique, you're schlepping a half hour through the woods, through the jungle, in the mud to get to the site. We were spoiled. 10 minutes, little walk. There was a big uphill at the end, and that was it. So we were in a plaza, and we opened, I want to say, 10 units overall. It was pretty easy excavating, but there were times where it felt like no matter how much we were pickaxing, troweling, whatever, it felt like we were going nowhere sometimes because you're working with tree roots. You're working with very hard dirt that isn't easy to break through. You also have to be very careful because a lot of the stuff that we had found was made out of limestone. The unit that I worked in the most was a very confusing one. It was it was at the very end of the plaza, and it was on a slope. So that was already a little bit interesting to have to work with. And there were massive trees on the ridge at the top of at the northernmost point of our unit. So we really had to work around a few things.
But what the unit ended up looking like, it was a plaster floor. By the time we got down to the end, it was a plaster floor, limestone plaster. And we had a wall, because we could, sometimes if you see a lot of faced stones, so like cut stones in a pile, it's very easy to tell when it's like a fallen over structure or one that's in situ, in place. So like we would find face stones and we're like, oh yay, finally. Nope, out of context, move it. So we finally got to like a standing wall, and it ran east and west on the ridge. And then there was like a bench right in the middle. And we were already like, okay. We lovingly called it our throne room, because it looked like a throne, like niche. We couldn't tell if it was inside, if it was outside of a building. Was it on the side of a building, like a little niche? Very strange unit. But it was like a bench, and then on the top of that was another bench, but it was too big for stairs. So we called it like two benches. We had walls running east and west and a plaster floor. And we were finding a lot of plaster, like fragments that were red. So clearly it was like painted plaster was decorating the sides of these walls. But again, there's no way it could have been a building, because it was right on the edge to a straight drop. So either it was like the outside wall, but then why would there be a plaster floor and a bench? Very strange. Some other units were just a straight up pair of stairs. We found like 2 steps perfectly intact. There was actually a unit that ended up having a very small burial. Now, I say very small burial because it was already exhumed by the time we got to it, not by looters, but definitely by like Maya that had to move. So they took what they could. They're not leaving ancestors behind. We found there was one long bone and very, very tiny fragments of jade found in this as well. So like when we heard that, we were like, where the hell are we? Like we just kept having questions on questions on questions about where we were. But it was definitely like a plaza, and we were more than likely an elite person's plaza. This wasn't like no Joe regulars living over there. So that's where, and I don't think it was even like a living quarters type of situation. I think it was just like their hub.
And Chan Chich was a full-on city, right?
I believe so, yes.
How much of it roughly do you think has been excavated and explored?
We broke ground.
Really?
So we started it. We were the ones who opened up that plaza.
Yeah, because I see here, I'm just looking at it quickly. It looks like they only started surveying that back in the 1990s. So it's a very recent site. I'm imagining they've only recently discovered it in the last 30 years or so.
And I believe that the LiDAR that we got for where we were was very recently done. So, I mean, the LiDAR was fantastic. It was a given that we were going to end up excavating there. But I believe that it is. Oh, Gallon Jug. That was the farm that we were attached to. Sorry, that just finally came back to my head. I was racking my brain because they were so lovely, and it was insane to be like connected to like this like farm area. By the way, the animals in Belize are straight out of a Disney movie. Like it is unreal. The turkeys over there are like peacocks. And the monkeys had an out for us. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
They were
the rascals.
Oh my gosh.
Now I'm curious. Now Chan Chich, that's not obviously included in that list of 417 recently undiscovered cities, right?
I don't believe so.
Because that was already known. I think those 417 were previously unknown sites.
I don't believe that this was involved in that. I mean, there was an excavation in the 1990s, like you said. It was the Dynastic Architecture Project that did it. They did the Upper Plaza, and then in 2014, there were more. But where we were was like, we broke ground on that. All of this was done through a program called BEAST, which is the Belize Estates Archaeological Survey Team. And this was through Texas Tech, I want to say.
That's random.
Texas Tech? Yeah, Texas Tech University. My professor used to be was a part of this team long ago, and then her, like, the guy who runs Beast asked her back out, and she snuck in 8 undergraduates with her.
Amazing.
So that's how we were able to get on this. Normally, he's not a fan of taking undergrads out because we're still, like, new, but we snuck on.
Amazing. Sneak me on next time.
If I can, okay? I'm not promising nothing. So we were at Courtyard B1.
Okay.
And then there was also Ain Wanik. It's not saying which, like, east, west, whatever part we were on. But yeah, it was a courtyard that we were in on a plaza. And that was like the elite courtyard. But it was called Courtyard B1. And then Ain Wanik was a ball court that they were looking into. That was also under Beast, but a different set of it was I believe 2 graduate students under the leader who were doing that excavation. I believe they were both grad students.
Yeah, and now we've only really talked about, outside of Teotihuacan, just Aztec and Mayan structures. I mean, even the Olmecs have structures, and it was trace Zapotecs.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm not really too super familiar. Like, only recently have I become more familiar with Maya, Aztec, Olmec, the Inca, like all kinds of different Mesoamerican and South American archaeology and like history and what all that has done. So you're my expert in this outside of my professors that I have worked with.
I am far from an expert. I am just a fan who wants to learn and see more. And now that I've been to Mexico City, I want to start. Like, I want to go to Tabasco, which is on the edge of the Mayan civilization, like kind of the western edge from Tabasco over to the Gulf of Mexico and the Yucatan. The Mayan civilization was just so massive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people realize, 417 undiscovered cities. I mean, how many cities do these guys have? It's absolutely incredible. And who knows what we're still going to find. So, we have the Zapotecs have structures. They're not as elaborate as, the Mayan or even Teotihuacan, but they're out there. There are still these complexes that you can go see from all these various Mesoamerican cultures. I want to see them all. I want to get to every single one if I can. Now that I've done that, now that I've checked off Mexico City, which I want to go back there so badly. And we may, in fact, the Alternative Gallery may be taking a trip there next November because one of our main artists, a resident artist, Breno Dominguez, he's from a town right outside of Mexico City, and he's an amazing artist. He's trying to set up an art exhibition there. It may be a solo show, might be a group show with maybe Mexican artists or maybe even some gallery artists here going down to Mexico City. And we want to try to spend
amazing.
like the whole month of November there. So we get the Day of the Dead celebrations, super deep culture there.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So I almost went back this past November because when I was on my way to Xochimilco, I met, I forget what tribe he was from, but he's an indigenous dancer that lives in Xochimilco. And apparently like all November long, the whole month, they do all kinds of rituals and performances, and they actually need people to come and help photograph it and document it. And we weren't able to unfortunately make it happen this year. But for next year, I'm thinking about doing like a massive month-long cultural trip to Mexico.
That's amazing.
I'll let you know in case you want to come visit us.
If it's not if I want to, it's if I can. It's if I have time.
Teotihuacan too. Like the bus ride is about an hour long. The bus ride to and from Teotihuacan is worth the trip alone. Just seeing like once you get outside the big city, because like you said about Belize, the people in Mexico City were just like the nicest people I've ever met in my life. I just wanted to cry every time I talked to somebody because they were so polite. They were so great. A lot of my friends who are from Mexico, they tell me, yeah, and that's the big city where the people aren't as nice as the small towns and villages. I'm like, what? They get even nicer as you get further away from Mexico City? I don't even know how that's possible.
Unheard of, mind you. Unheard of in our neck of the woods of Pennsylvania.
The culture there, the cultures of Mexico are incredible. Now, I'm curious. Now, if anybody listening to this might have an interest in getting started with archaeology, what would you recommend they do?
Ooh.
Obviously going to school.
Yeah, but I'm not like, even that's not it. That'll only get you the paperwork. I'll be honest. That'll get you reading a lot. And then sometimes you excavate. Well, first thing I would recommend is seeing what archaeological societies, what archaeology programs, Park Service, Society of Pennsylvania Arc, whichever, sign up for their newsletters. Go to their meetings. They're all open to the public, I believe. Like the Forks chapter, the Lenape chapter, like it's all open. Find their social media and just like stick with it. You know, in New Jersey, ASNJ, the Archaeological Society of New Jersey, they've offered before public archaeology days where you don't have to be a real quote-unquote archaeologist, but you can still be involved in archaeological excavations. I was recently a part of one down in South Jersey. I mean, the southest part of Jersey I could have gone to. I was there at the Cohansey Bluffs excavation where we were excavating a native site that was under threat of destruction by the river that was eating away at the bluffs, especially during the drought. It was really bad. So I went and worked over there, and I was sought after as like a professional volunteer, basically someone who's been in archaeology long enough to kind of guide people to make sure that they're not like excavating incorrectly or misidentifying stuff. But like just like see what's going on, because there's so much going on in archaeology. It just has the worst PR team.
Yeah.
So, you know, get involved with the local archaeological societies and get on a dig however you can. You know, like don't be afraid to be that person who emails every single day. That's how I got into it. I was emailing back and forth with the Park Service for a year before I became a volunteer.
Wow.
Because I was stubborn and so were they. It's a lot of you having to take some initiative, but
Sure.
it's definitely there. I would say New Jersey is a little bit better with it than Pennsylvania, just because Pennsylvania is so vast.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of people working in, I mean, to be honest, I don't really know who all is working in it outside of the Park Service as like contractors or whoever. A lot of it is like contracted from companies in New Jersey, actually. So rewind. Get involved with the archaeological societies, get on their email, look at their newsletters, their bulletins. The websites are going to look archaic, but they're there.
Well, I think that's fitting of an archaeology society.
I mean, yeah. Go to like Facebook forums. Like I said, NEPA Archaeology, it's very active. Danny Younger is posting in there all the time, whether it's just articles or updates from the chapter. You know, that's the best place I would say to go. And then from there, you can just pop the question like, hey, does anyone know of any public archaeology going on? Anything you can get involved in? And then from there, you just kind of like get roped into things. And that you kind of learn by doing. And then if you want to pursue it as a career or look into it for school, definitely like go back to those forums and see like, hey, where did you guys go? How did you guys do your education? No matter what you want to do, go to community college first. Save yourself so much money, please. Even without COVID, I probably would have done it, and it was the best decision for me because you don't understand how many opportunities NAC had for me just by going there. So go there, take a few classes from the community college. If you really are like still unsure about it, like take an intro to anthropology class or something like that, and then see what it's all about and see like, okay, maybe I'm more cultural than I am archaeology. Like you could, there's all kinds of things that you can do with anthropology.
Yeah.
Like I said, it just has the worst PR team, or just people just don't know about it, or they just don't see it. They see it as like a fun hobby. My favorite thing is when people like ask me like, so what's your major? And I'm like, archaeology. And they're like, oh, wow, I wanted to do that when I was a kid. Well, I'm 23, never grew out of that. And yeah, now I have a career in it. So it's pretty great.
We'll try to include some resources in the show notes for anyone who's interested, and
I'll gather as many as I can.
Okay.
They're slipping my mind right now, but
That's
I'll
all
try
right.
to get you a list.
no problem. And you know we're coming to the end of the episode here, and I know you also do art too. Can you quickly tell us about your work and what you do?
Absolutely. So my art stuff is under the name Resin by Rebecca. It's essentially resin jewelry and some like home decorations. The main thing I do is kind of like wall decorations, but mostly what I do is a lot of jewelry, and it's very much florals based. I do a lot of stuff with crystals as well. I essentially raid my mom's garden for flowers. I press them and then I put them into resin. I do earrings. I do chokers. Yeah, that's mainly what I have done with it. It's kind of a hobby that I've just somehow like found I can get a couple of like dollars out of at like punk rock flea markets and stuff like that. Plus it gets you an opportunity to meet a lot of cool people and be involved in like, you know, like Camp Punk Sylvania when I vended that one, punk rock flea markets throughout Pennsylvania.
That's why art vending is so awesome.
Yeah, it's really fun. Recently, I would say it's like there's a lot of vendors, there's not a lot of buyers, but that's just kind of like the state of the world right now. You know, not everybody has the money. I don't think it's a lack of people knowing about local artists. I think it's a lack of people having the money, unfortunately.
The arts are suffering right now for sure across the board.
They really are. And I don't want to blame it on people who are buying somewhere else because they hate us. No, they just can't afford it sometimes, and I totally get it. You know what I mean? That's why I always try to have at my table like a $5 or a $1 thing, so that people can still like support local businesses but not feel like they have to like spend so much money, because you know it does take a lot of money to make the stuff that we make. I'm not gonna say that I'm like the most inexpensive person I've ever met by any means, and I don't expect anybody to, you know, dumb their prices down or anything like that just so they make sales. No, not at all. But I've also been the buyer in this situation. You know, I've also been the person who's gone to a punk rock flea market and bought one thing only because that's all I could.
Yeah.
So I try to have like, what's it called? Like a mystery scoop, where you just kind of scoop a bunch of stuff out of a little bin and then you can pay $5 and you have like a whole bunch of like random crap from the scoop. I also just have a lot of pressed flowers. You know what I mean? And I'll make like little baggies of pressed flowers, and it'll be like $1 for a little bag of flowers. Just something. Because I know people want to support, but they just don't have $20 for a pair of earrings. And that's totally fine. I don't expect everyone to have $20 for a pair of earrings. I'm mainly doing this because it was cheaper to be a vendor than to buy a ticket.
Yeah.
Just going to be straight up. You know what I mean? So it's just fun. And I feel like, especially during COVID, we all kind of became the artists, and now there's like so many artists and so few buyers, which is kind of a strangely good problem, because now we know how to make our stuff on our own, but then we have no one to buy it except for me, who's like makes one sale and is immediately running to another vendor's booth like, I'm going to buy this now. So speaking of vending, I mainly vend on my breaks, so like winter break or summer break, and if I do vend, it's like sporadically. I never really like go into like pre-planning where I'm gonna vend. It's just kind of whatever comes up. But I also sell some stuff through my Instagram. It's just that right now it's finals and I am not doing that, but I will be at the Sherman Theater Punk Rock Flea Market on January 11th. 2025, so definitely come for that. It's amazing. My best friend Chaska is the one that put it together. He put the one together that we had last year, and it was amazing. So definitely come check out this one.
Awesome.
That's my shameless plug for myself and for my friend.
No, definitely put a shameless plug in there, and we'll make sure. I think I saw the flyer for that, so we'll make sure we include that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's going to be bands, there's going to be tattoo artists, there's all kinds of different vendors of all different art styles and mediums, so it's definitely worth your time.
Yeah, one of the things I'm trying to do right now is make sure the Alternative Gallery is helping to push events that we have nothing to do with, because I think that cross-promotion and support of one another is very essential to building a more cohesive scene that's working for more artists. And I have a website now, talking about shameless plugs. It's my name, BrandonWunder.com, WUNDER. I just actually started my blog today. My first blog was about my solo backpacking trip in Loyal Sauk State Forest this past summer. It was a fascinating trip. If you're curious, check it out. But the reason I mention this is because next week's blog on Sunday, it would be Sunday, December 15th, I'm going to blog about my Mexico trip. I thought it was perfectly timed with this conversation, and I'm, doing research into the episode for the podcast.
I see now that I was brought on here just to be a shameless plug. It's fine. It's fine.
Well, no, in fact, that I used our episode as a launch pad for I was like, you know what? I'm already doing this, and I'm getting caught up because I did a lot of cool stuff over the summer, and I didn't really tell anybody about it. I didn't really post about it because I kind of took the summer off from social media because I just got so tired of it. And
Yeah.
I just went out and had these amazing adventures and didn't really mention it or show anyone. So now through my blog, I'm going to share photos and my experiences, and I'm hoping that it gets people more into the art and culture of Mexico and Central America and Native Americans, all these amazing cultures around the world, not just limited to this part of the world.
Definitely.
You'll be interested. I'll make sure I send that to you next week when it's out. I think you'll be really fascinated, especially with the photos of the
please.
cultural stuff. You'll be all about it.
Hell yeah, that sounds amazing.
Thank you for coming on here. Obviously, we covered a lot of cultural stuff.
Yes.
I'm hoping people were taking notes and looking things up during the conversation here. Once again, we've been chatting with Rebecca Ashdot, an archaeologist and artist, as well as the vice president of the Lenape chapter of the Society for Pennsylvania Archaeology. You can check out Rebecca's work and her adventures by visiting her Instagram at resin_by_Rebecca, and that'll be in the show notes. Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on Art Bazaar and telling us about all the cool stuff you got going on.
Thank you so much for letting me ramble and be distracted from the compounding pile of papers that I have to write.
Truly fascinating stuff. And, you know, as much as we got to talk, there's more stuff we have to talk about too. So we'll make it a point in the near future to keep the conversation going. So thank you again, Rebecca.
Yeah, absolutely.
And good luck on finals.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you're enjoying the Art Bazaar podcast, please help us grow by liking and subscribing to the podcast. We want to reach a worldwide audience to help bring attention to all of the amazing creators and unique folks we bring on. They certainly deserve it. And that's all for now. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time on Art Bazaar.